Part 39. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 381. 3 days later, in the underground training ground of Daxialonke. Bai Xing, Xiaolikan, Fang Yahuang, and Emma, 4 level 5 ability users, stood together. Emma yawned. "Why did you call us here so early? Do you know?" "I don't know." Fang Yahuang smiled. "It may be related to those demons. After all, the high-end forces to fight against those demons will be us, besides your majesty." Demons. Emma's eyes also showed a trace of worry. She remembered the information about Seagram. The combat power shown by the other party was simply 2 dimensions from the 5th level ability users. Will we have to deal with such terrifying things in the future? Emma sighed. "Just do your own job well." After Bai Xing said this, the 4 people stopped talking. Now in the entire Pan-Continental Alliance, Bai Xing is the strongest level 5 ability user. After he presided over the Western Continent Unification War, he accepted Daxialonke, and his majesty became increasingly profound. It can be said that among the ability users, he has become the first person under Li Anping. In the silence, the steel door of the training room opened automatically, and Li Anping walked in slowly. "Your Majesty." The 4 people bowed their heads and greeted at the same time. Li Anping waved his hand and said, "Don't move, I'll give you something." After that, he flashed and pointed at the foreheads of Bai Xing and the other 4. The strength of the 4 people was revealed with this finger. Because of the difference in strength, their reactions were also different. The first one to be pointed at was Emma. Among the 4 people, her reaction was the worst and her close combat ability was the weakest. Facing Li Anping's casual finger, she couldn't react at all and was directly pointed at. Emma's eyes froze for a moment, and her whole body was motionless, as if she was fixed. Then came Xiaolikan and Fang Yahuang. These 2 people have experienced many battles. They are experienced. When Li Anping pointed at them, they all instinctively wanted to dodge. This was not distrust or hostility, but purely the instinct of a warrior facing a sudden attack. But although Li Anping pointed casually, the speed was too fast for them. He pointed out with one finger. The strong wind blew in their faces, and the 2 felt a slight chill on their foreheads, and then they stood still like Emma. The last finger pointed at Bai Xing. Compared with Fang Yahuang, Xiaolikan, and Emma, his combat experience was more than 100 times richer. His control of the body, the reaction speed of the nerves, and the close combat ability were all at the pinnacle. When Li Anping pointed out this finger, he had already understood a fact, that is, he could dodge, but it was not enough to dodge Li Anping's finger. So he simply did not dodge, and there was no panic in his eyes. He just let Li Anping touch his forehead lightly with one finger, and then left. After being hit by this finger, he knew why Emma, Xiaolikan, and Fang Yahuang stood there stupidly. Li Anping's finger was not an attack, but a variety of massive information. Various insights about the 5th and 6th energy levels, about the understanding of spirit and matter. The content is enough to rival a library. Just then, Li Anping's cold voice sounded in the ears of the 4 people. "This is the Queen's insight about the 5th to 6th energy levels. There are too many things that can only be understood but not expressed in words, so I called you directly and put it into your consciousness. Don't resist, experience it well. I hope to break through the 5th energy level." After saying that, Li Anping looked at the 4 people who were still standing there stupidly, and left directly. The reason why he gave them the Queen's insight, instead of Li Anping's power system, it was because Li Anping's own power system from electromagnetic drive to material reorganization and then quantum computing was not perfected. And others can't use it at all. Just the need for computing power comparable to that of a supercomputer excludes almost all humans on the Earth. After leaving the training room, the door has been closed again, and more than a dozen level 4 ability users are waiting outside, waiting for the 4 people to come out. As for the matters under the four people, Li Enping had personally ordered them to temporarily take over, and they must not affect the four people's perception this time. As for Woody and Eddie, Li Enping thought about it and decided not to give them the gift immediately. One reason is that the two have joined for too short a time, and they are treated the same as Beizing, SpecialAbilities, and others, which makes people feel unfair. Another reason is that humans are too easy to breed ambition, especially after gaining powerful power. Although Li Enping doesn't care whether they are loyal or not, he is unwilling to destroy the high-end power of humans again. So he decided to wait until someone among Beizing, Fang Yuhuang, SpecialAbilities, and Emma breaks through, and then go to find Woody and Judy. Li Enping took a few steps, and the next moment, his body turned into a mist, a breeze, and the whole person left the base at a speed that was difficult for human eyes to detect. After returning to the Imperial Library, Li Enping no longer read those theoretical books, but looked at the kitten in front of him. He watched the kitten do various actions, and flicked his fingers from time to time. Suddenly the kitten's body shook, and it stood up, and began to walk on its two hind legs like a human. "It's ugly." After Li Enping said this, he moved his fingers again, and the kitten returned to its original appearance. He is changing the cat's consciousness by modifying the atomic arrangement of its brain. This is equivalent to changing a very simple function to a more complex one. This can also be regarded as a step to accumulate for his consciousness reorganization. At this time, Yan Bei pushed open the door of the reading room and walked in. Li Enping said without looking back, "I'm back from Xindanjiang." Yeah, Yan Bei was silent. Since he was seriously injured by Seagram's eyes, he has felt his weakness more deeply and wanted to become stronger more urgently. After recovering from the hospital bed, he ignored the outside world and devoted himself to training crazily. Last month, he went to Xindanjiang alone again and started a journey of hard training. Li Enping glanced at him, and Yan Bei felt that he was seen through. He has become stronger again. Thinking of this, Yan Bei raised his head, looked at Li Enping and said, "Your Majesty, I want to become stronger. Can you help me?" Li Enping glanced at him coldly, and then turned his eyes to the cat, and saw that under his operation, the cat's consciousness was constantly modified and made various complex movements. "It can be, but you also understand that ordinary methods have no effect on you. But my ability is different from yours. Your collapse is a very powerful ability that is very difficult to upgrade. If I want to help you, the method may be rough." Yan Bei nodded seriously and said, "It doesn't matter. I can accept any method. Even if I die because of it." Yan Bei was stunned. The next moment his eyes had turned into firmness. "The weak in this world don't even have the right to choose how to die. If I can't become a strong person and live, I would rather die immediately." Li Enping smiled, "Okay then." His eyes turned cold, and the next moment his palm was pressed on Yan Bei's forehead. "Then, do your best to survive." The next moment, Yan Bei's eyes went dark, and the Imperial Library and Li Enping had disappeared from his sight. What appeared in front of him again was an extremely empty space, and all he could see was white. Li Enping's voice seemed to come from the sky and entered his ears. "This is your dream. But I have combined your body with your dream." Yan Bei lowered his head, looked at his body, and clenched his fists. He didn't feel that this was a so-called dream at all. "So, any damage you receive in this dream will be faithfully reflected in your body." Yan Bei smiled and said coldly, "That means if you die here, you will really die, right?" "Yes, you will encounter stronger and stronger opponents in this dream. The environment here can't rely on anything except yourself." The next moment, countless particles appeared in front of Yan Bei, and then continued to combine, gradually turning into a human figure. It was a very handsome young man, and he looked at his gradually combined body. He opened his mouth and said, "Me? Not dead?" Ching Chan. Yan Bei looked at the person who appeared in front of him. He didn't expect that this dead man who only appeared in the information would appear again. He murmured, "So that's it? Did he let me deal with a strong enemy in the dream?" The next moment, he rushed out, waved his hands, and a collapsed space was already unfolded with Kingchen's head as the center. Kingchen's head was blown up by a blow before he could react at all, and fell to the ground. "It's over." Yanbei looked around. Who will be next? But at this moment, a huge white palm stretched out from Kingchen's body and grabbed Yanbei directly in the palm. "You want to kill me right away, are you sick?" With Kingchen's words, the huge palm exerted force violently, and had already squeezed Yanbei into a pool of rotten meat. Kingchen's ability is to transform into a giant. After becoming the 5th energy level, his usually beautiful body is not his real body at all. The next second, Yanbei opened his eyes again. "Me? Not dead," Qingchan murmured. Yanbei rushed towards Qingchan again. Li Anping shook his head. He didn't tell Yanbei the truth about this dream. Yanbei would not really die here. After each death, his dream would end and he would enter the next dream, repeating until he won and then fought the next enemy. As for Yanbei, he would think that he was struggling between life and death every time and then won. In this way, he would continue to stimulate his potential in life and death. However, this method still has its shortcomings. For the 4th level ability users, Li Anping can only modify their dreams and can no longer modify the other party's memory at will. So this kind of thing can only be done once. And the human spirit and body have their limits. If they still don't break through after reaching the limit, they may never break through. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglango. Chapter 382. Yanbei is not the only one working hard. The Royal Academy of Sciences in Xindanjiang. 30 floors underground. In a room made entirely of silver-white metal, Jingguang was walking around with his upper body bare-chested, panting. The golden energy of his whole body was surging, and he was already in a golden-haired, blue-eyed transformation state. And Jingguang, who was already in a transformed state, had 10 times the strength and speed of the original, but even so, he stumbled every step he took, as if he had just learned to walk. Beside Jingguang, there was a girl with short blue hair, holding the original 10-fist sword that should have been in Bai Xing's hands. Seeing Jingguang's difficulty in walking, she shouted, "Sir, do you want to lower the gravity?" No. Jingguang flatly rejected the other party's proposal and continued to move under the constraints of multiple gravity. After walking for more than half an hour, his steps became more and more stable, and he had gradually adapted to the change in gravity. During this period, sweat kept dripping from his body, almost turning his feet into a small pond. Feeling the weakness coming from all over his body, Jingguang took out a bottle of white reagent from his waist pocket and drank it directly. That was the immortality potion extracted by the Royal Academy of Sciences, which can greatly enhance the vitality of the human body, but now it is directly used by Jingguang to replenish physical strength and energy. Of course, this is also due to the great progress of the current technology of the Royal Academy of Sciences. The extraction of immortality potions is not as difficult as in the past. Jingguang relied on the immortality potion to replenish the energy consumed by his body and exercised in a state of multiple gravity in a transformed state. And this state has lasted for a full 5 days. He has never tried to maintain the transformed state for such a long time, desperately urging the potential in his body. But even with the supplement of the immortality potion, his energy was consumed very badly. But when he thought of Yanbei, and thought of that guy who defeated him in 30 seconds on the first day he returned from Xindanjiang, he felt a sincere sense of shame. Not enough. Jingguang turned his head and said to the blue-haired girl beside him, "Increase the gravity by 1 more time." "But just do it. If there is any problem, I will take responsibility." The blue-haired girl nodded helplessly, mobilized the mental energy in her body, and once again strengthened the output of gravity in the Ten-Fist sword. Jingguang groaned, and the sudden increase in gravity directly pressed him to the ground, kneeling on one knee. "Sir, are you okay?" The blue-haired girl immediately became nervous and planned to withdraw the ability to activate the Ten-Fist sword. But she saw that Jingguang had raised a hand to stop him. "Don't stop." Just like that. Jingguang's muscles all over his body trembled, and the golden mental energy surged again. He actually stood up slowly with his whole body trembling. That's the feeling. When Jingguang maintained the transformation state for more than 12 hours, he felt extremely tired. When the time exceeded 24 hours, a feeling of reaching the limit kept pressing him. He wanted him to stop. But he didn't stop, but chose to continue. The feeling of almost collapse filled his body, until the fifth day, Jingguang found something different. His body began to change, an unprecedented feeling came to his mind, as if the mind energy in his body was melting with his body, and the burden of transformation seemed to be getting smaller. On the same night, Su Zhenying quietly got up from the bed and walked towards the location of Central Park. The entrance test of the Academy City has ended. Jason was tested to have the ability of the mutant system, and Su Zhenying was considered to be incapable, just like last time, and was rejected from the entrance test for incapable people. Now, the woman who talked to him on the high-rise building has become his last straw. Climbing over the wall, Su Zhenying walked carefully on the grass of Central Park, heading towards the artificial lake. Will she be true? Am I a person with ability? At this moment, a palm slapped his shoulder, which scared him. He turned his head and looked behind him, and found a young man standing behind him, and took his hand back with an embarrassed look. "Sorry to scare you," the young man smiled. "Are you going to the artificial lake too?" Yes, Su Zhenying nodded cautiously. Suddenly he remembered the barefoot woman's words, and he was not the only one coming. He saw Nai Xian standing in front of him and nodded with a smile. "Then we will be classmates from now on, let's go together." So Su Zhenying followed Nai Xian to the location of the artificial lake in a daze. He was innocent along the way. Nai Xian told him his identity and origin in a few words. Then they saw two girls by the artificial lake. The moment they saw Li Anping, both Nai Xian and Su Zhenying's breathing became heavier. "Okay, let's start," Li Anping said directly to them after seeing Su Zhenying and Nai Xian arrive. Nai Xian and another girl who looked only in her teens all sat cross-legged and closed their eyes. Su Zhenying asked somewhat at a loss, "What should I do?" Being so close to the girl made him feel a little uncomfortable. "Do this." Before he finished speaking, a page of paper floated into Su Zhenying's hands. On it was recorded something called the Diamond Spirit Refining Method. It was a method summarized by the Queen of Heaven to train mental power. Although it was only the most superficial part, it was also very profound for the three people in front of him. At that moment, the three people slowly practiced under the guidance of Li Anping, and under the scanning of the mental force field, Li Anping saw all the practice states of the three people. The changes in human spirit and the operation of consciousness. Everything was recorded bit by bit. The entire human world was like a machine with a full spring. Under Li Anping's will, it developed at an unprecedented speed. Various technologies that far exceeded this era entered people's lives one after another. With the help of the folding gate, the whole world was closely connected. Controlled nuclear fusion, and the vacuum zero-point energy extractor that Li Anping later made, almost solved all energy problems. The various engineering robots developed by the Royal Academy of Sciences, which were derived from the technology of the God King, have gradually liberated human physical labor. And superpowers have never been as well known to all humans as they are now. They even appear in the daily lives of many people. 3 months after the end of the Western Continent Unification War, the global economy has grown by 20%. Because of the liberation of productivity and the inexhaustible energy, social welfare has greatly increased, and people no longer have to rush for work. Human society has gradually entered an unprecedented prosperity, and some people call it the Golden Age. Code Country, under the frozen ocean. The underwater world of nearly 12,000 meters is still silent. But countless shining lights illuminate this land of death as if it were daytime. At this time, the entire area around the cross-boundary gate has been completely covered by large areas of fortifications, and the cross-boundary gate is directly exposed to the seabed, because more than 12,000 meters of sea water is naturally the best means of defense. Under such pressure, most demons below level 5 are probably unable to survive in this environment. Electromagnetic waves, infrared rays, sonar and other detection instruments covered the entire boundary gate and its surroundings. Once anything came out of it, it would send a signal to Tianjing, the headquarters of Daxia Lonke. The incarnation of mind energy sat directly on the seabed 50 meters in front of the boundary gate. The mind energy on his body also completely covered the boundary gate, and he kept a detection posture. In this dead silence, Seagram, who was imprisoned in the chest of the mind energy incarnation, spoke. Li Enping, we have said everything we should say. When are you going to let us go? Seeing that the mind energy incarnation had no intention of answering them, Seagram's eyes showed a hint of cruelty, and he gave Gabu a look. The next moment, a huge explosion occurred in the mind energy incarnation body, almost swelling his whole body. Self-explosion, Li Enping tried his best to control the impact force in his body from leaking out. He didn't expect that Gabu's level 5 ability user would actually self-explode. And the power of his self-explosion was far beyond his expectations, much stronger than Gabu's own combat power. The current incarnation of mind energy is much weaker than Li Enping's original body. Once the explosive force breaks through his body, it will probably sweep the surrounding base into ruins. The incarnation of mind energy has to use all its strength to suppress the explosive force in its body. Although it was somewhat unexpected, this explosive force can only delay Li Enping for 2 or 3 seconds at most. But in the next moment, the red light on Seagram's body surged, and with the power of Gabu's self-explosion, he actually broke through the confinement of the incarnation of mind energy and rushed straight to the sea surface. You are looking for death. 2 seconds later, the incarnation of mind energy suppressed the impact of the self-explosion, and the whole body turned into a black light and rushed up. The departure of the two made the entire seabed silent again. Only various instruments still faithfully executed the original plan, scanning the situation of the seabed around again and again. Because the environment of the entire seabed base is too harsh and there are incarnations of mind energy guarding it, there are no living people, and everything is monitored by machines and Li Enping. Not long after the incarnation of the mind left, a foot stretched out from the gate. It looked like a human foot, but it was unscathed even though it was 12,000 meters deep in the seabed. The next moment, a person emerged from the gate. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 383. A man came out of the gate. He looked no different from an ordinary earthling, but he was wearing very worn linen clothes that looked like some kind of prison uniform. There seemed to be a thin membrane on the outside of his body, which prevented the water pressure from acting directly on him. When he saw the underwater world in front of him and the underwater bases built by the Federation, a curious look appeared on his face. Strange metal shell, no magic fluctuations were felt, but there was light. Biological detection. There are no creatures inside. But at this moment, 3 engineering robots had been launched from the base and swam towards the location of the prisoners at high speed. Huh? Puppet. Still can't feel the magic fluctuations. What a strange world. Seeing the engineering robot coming in front of him, a capture net was sprayed out from the robot's body and covered the prisoner. Stupid creature, are you trying to challenge the majesty of the wizard? The prisoner raised his palm, and endless cold air diffused from his body, rushing to the seabed around him in an instant, like a blooming ice lotus, freezing all the buildings within a radius of 1 kilometer, including the engineering robot. Seeing that the enemies around him had been cleared, the prisoner-like man showed a smug smile on his face, and the next moment, he soared into the sky and rose towards the sea. During the rise, his figure gradually became transparent until it slowly disappeared. At the moment the man appeared, Li Enping, who was far away in Tianjing, had received the news. The information was transmitted to his mind through electromagnetic waves, and then restored to a three-dimensional image in front of him. Why would a human come from the White Land? Li Enping frowned. Is it a demon that looks like a human? Seagram just led away the spirit incarnation at this moment. Is it a coincidence? Or was it premeditated? Li Enping's ears recalled the voice of the man's mouth. It was the last voice recorded by the monitoring equipment, but he couldn't tell what the other person said. Is this your language? What does it mean? Li Enping thought about it, but unfortunately there were too few clues and he didn't come to a conclusion. At this time, the image of Bai Xing appeared in front of him. Sir, we have temporarily lost contact with the area near the gate. Do we need to send someone over? No, I will let the incarnation of mind go there first after I catch Seagram, Li Enping ordered. He looked at the prisoner in the three-dimensional image and said coldly, first find the guy who came out of the gate. Catch him. Yes, sir. The last picture in Li Enping's image, the gradually destroyed base, frowned. I was still careless. The seabed is not suitable for other people's combat environment. I thought it would be enough to let the incarnation of mind guard it, but I didn't expect it to be a mistake. The key is that there are not enough people for underwater combat. It seems that we need to strengthen our strength in this area. At the same time, the 30 Prophet satellites surrounding the entire Earth have been fully operational and began to search for the man in prison uniforms who appeared in the picture. The man's head portrait appeared in the police, the internet, and the news, but the government did not reveal the man's true identity. Instead, it said that he was a capable person on the run and had a strong aggressiveness. Death zone in the north of the Code country. Shang Tian looked at the new wanted order on the internet and laughed. The opportunity has come. Let's go, Kudia, let's go to World No. 1. Is it finally done? Kudia stood up, stretched his waist, and made a jingling sound all over his body. But what about Li Enping? His mind incarnation may return to the gate at any time. So we have to hurry up. Shang Tian quickly tapped the keyboard and called all the team members he had selected. Now Li Enping has temporarily lost the monitoring of the gate. As long as we seize this opportunity to go in, he will not know that we have passed. I am afraid we will never encounter such a coincidence again in the future. A few minutes later, Shang Tian, Kudia, and more than a dozen men and women have set off towards the location of the gate. On the other side, the man who walked out of the gate has arrived in a small town in the north of the Code country after several hours of flight. Looking at this very prosperous town in front of him, the buildings are completely built of reinforced concrete. The man remained invisible and sneaked in quietly. In a house, he glanced at the body under his feet. It was a blonde woman, but now her face had turned blue and she fell to the ground. Her body still exuded a chill. Next to the woman, a man with blonde hair was kneeling, trembling all over as he looked at the prisoner-like man. Please, don't kill me. The money is in the safe, you can take it? The prisoner looked at him with boredom. It's not a common language, nor an imperial language. Is it a language unique to the natives here? There's no other way. He raised a finger, and a white light shot out from his fingertips and flew to the blonde man's forehead. Try to understand the language. The next moment, the photoelectric touched the blonde man's forehead, then returned to the man's palm and disappeared. At this moment, he found that he could understand what the native in front of him was saying. Shut up, the blond man said again, already speaking fluently in Codex. I have no interest in your so-called wealth at all. He rubbed his chin and said to the blond man, Aboriginal, what's your name? Henry said tremblingly, with a flash of fear in his eyes every time he saw the nanny's body lying on the ground. You can call me Lord Jonah, the man who called himself Jonah said. Now, I'm a little hungry. Please help me get some food first. I understand. Henry stood up with some fear and walked towards the kitchen. And Jonah has become a person with somewhat strange abilities in his heart. Damn it, shouldn't all ability users have been accepted into major colleges? Where did this lunatic escape from? Although he thought so in his heart, when Henry turned his head and saw the other party decomposing the nanny's body into pieces that were invisible to the naked eye and disappearing, the fear in his heart became more serious. Jonah turned his head. Looking at Henry with a look of fear on his face, he smiled sinisterly. Henry, I'm already very hungry. You don't want me to eat one of your arms, do you? I know, I'll get you something to eat right now. Henry walked quickly to the refrigerator. Anyway, just get him something to eat first. After looking at the items in the refrigerator, he asked Jonah, Sir, can you eat instant noodles? Instant noodles, what is that? Jonah said, looking at the light on the ceiling with a curious look. Whatever, just have some instant noodles. When Henry came to the living room with a bowl of instant noodles, he saw Jonah quickly pressing the switch on the wall and looking at the flashing lights above his head. He showed a thoughtful look. Interesting trick. When he saw Henry coming over with his face raised, his nose twitched. It smells good. After taking a bite of the instant noodles, his face showed joy. Not bad, this instant noodles tastes good. Seeing the other person eating instant noodles happily, Henry thought to himself, is this guy from the country? But what the other party did next seemed to further confirm his suspicion. As Henry explains to Jonah, the toilet bowl. When the water could be pumped out unlimited times, the other party's eyes showed clear disbelief. Mortal, are you trying to deceive a mage? Jonah pointed to the toilet and said, this thing doesn't have any magical fluctuations. How can it create water out of thin air? Henry tried to explain to him the water pipes, water pressure, and water valves, but he didn't know the theory himself, so it was naturally impossible for him to explain it clearly to Jonah. But after Jonah tried to flush the toilet dozens of times, he also had to admit that the mortal in front of him did not deceive him. Interesting and stupid natives, do you put all your energy into enjoying yourself? Facing the opponent's powerful force, Henry could only choose to secretly despise the country bumpkin in front of him. I studied the water pipes, circuits, lights, and refrigerators in my home in turn. After there was a gas stove, Jonah changed into Henry's pajamas and lay on the sofa. He thought to himself, what a bunch of hedonistic natives. He touched the soft sofa and the silk pajamas on his body again. It's such a soft chair and this piece of clothing is so exquisitely crafted that even the emperor's chief tailor probably doesn't have such craftsmanship. However, after a little study of the equipment in the other party's home, Jonah also remembered the reason for his arrival. However, he asked several times in a row and found that the other party had never heard of the Saint Laurent Empire, the Mages Guild, or Carmel. Regarding the magic that Jonah was most concerned about, Henry was even more ignorant. It seems that for them, magic is only something that appears in novels and dramas. It seems that this continent is very far away from the empire, and it doesn't even have any knowledge of magic. It's such a remote place. But when he thought that this was still a period of ignorance without magic, some of Jonah's original worries disappeared. Since there are no mages in this continent, I don't have to worry about anything. But you can't just believe this mortal's words. Maybe the mage here is a hermit, and his level is not enough to contact them. Maybe, I can meet their king first. Anyway, no one here knows me, so I can make up an origin at random. If there are mages here, then join them. If there are no mages, hee hee. After thinking for a while, Jonah asked again, Do you have a king here? What should I do if I want to see the king? After saying this, Jonah raised his chin high and said with a unique pride, as a representative of the Saint Laurent Empire Mage Guild, I request to see the king of the most powerful country on your continent. Is this guy crazy? But Henry naturally wouldn't say it out loud. He thought for a while and said slowly, if you insist on telling me about the king, there is indeed one, but if you want to see it, I'm afraid it won't be easy. I need to talk to the police. One time. Lord Jonah, would you allow me to make a phone call? Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 384. Phone? What is that? Then under Henry's explanation, Jonah nodded and said, I understand, something similar to a communication spell. So, do you want to contact your officials and ask them to tell the king? Well, yes, Henry nodded, but with my status in our country, it may be more difficult to alert the king. Jonah smiled and said casually, it's okay, at most it's just a matter of finding them one by one. Just go and make a call. When Henry heard this, he immediately jumped up in his heart, this madman, I need to call the police as soon as possible. He walked to the landline, picked up the phone, and dialed the three numbers 112. Jonah on the side looked at Henry with curiosity, and at the same time opened his ears, listening carefully to the voice coming from the microphone. After only 2 beeps, a crisp female voice answered the phone and asked, hello, please say. Hello, I'm here. He glanced at Jonah, who listened curiously to the female voice on the phone and nodded to him. Henry said hesitantly, there is a magician he wants to see. His Majesty Li Enping. Magician, the woman opposite was obviously stunned, but the next second her tone was already dissatisfied, I'm sorry, please don't joke, otherwise. Henry said anxiously, I'm not kidding, There was a beeping sound during the conversation, and the person on the other end had obviously hung up the phone. Henry smiled bitterly, looked at Jonah and said, Sir, because we have never had a mage here, it may be difficult for them to believe in the existence of a mage. When Jonah heard this, he frowned and said amusedly, a group of ignorant natives dare to deny the existence of mages. Henry on the side was afraid that the other party would do something out of control, and then said, Sir, I can tell them that you are a capable person, so they may be more accepting. Ability user? What is that? Well, they are just guys with superpowers. Some of them can breathe fire, some can fly, and some can become invisible. Jonah asked a few more questions, and after hearing Henry's explanation, he nodded arrogantly and said, I understand, it's a warlock. I didn't expect that you don't have a magician here. But there are warlocks. But how can those barbarians who only know how to fight with instinct compare with mages? John asked cautiously, then I. Forget it, you natives can't understand the greatness of the mage. Just say how you can succeed. Henry nodded, quickly picked up the phone again, and dialed 112. After the beep, a clear female voice answered the phone. Henry didn't even listen to what she said and shouted directly, hello? I have a very powerful ability user here, and he wants to see His Majesty Li Enping. I'm sorry, the female voice over there still maintained a polite attitude, we can't contact His Majesty directly. If you want to see His Majesty, I suggest you go directly to the sky. Beijing. Henry heard this answer. I cursed in my heart, damn, you're sick of answering so seriously, please click on obstruction to send the police over, catch this madman. But he obviously didn't dare to say this directly, so he could only continue, I don't care, you must inform His Majesty immediately, my friend is impatient to wait. Obviously his problem could not be solved. After trying to persuade him several times to no avail, the call over there was hung up again. While Henry was on the phone, Jonah's attention has always been focused on the telephone. It is obvious that he is very curious about how this small box without magic fluctuations sends the sound. After seeing Henry hang up the phone again, he frowned again. Failed again? It's really troublesome. She just said that we can go directly to Tianjing to find your king. Hearing what the other party said, Henry's heart lifted again. No, if I really take him to Tianjing to find His Majesty, it would be too dangerous for me. You absolutely cannot take him to Tianjing. Think of this. A flash of light suddenly lit up in Henry's heart. This guy. He remembered everything the other person had said and done since he entered the house. He thought with some uncertainty, could this madman really be a magician from the Saint Laurent Empire? Jonah over there had already stood up impatiently. Mortal, in which direction is Tianjing? I will take you to fly there directly. Henry only thought of the other party as a madman at first, but now he thinks about it carefully. If the other party is really a magician from another world, then everything is not unreasonable. Thinking of this, he was even more unwilling to follow the other party into this muddy water and go to Tianjing. He said directly, "Sir, our king's whereabouts are unpredictable all year round. He may not be there even if he goes to Tianjing. It is better to let him come to us. Directly find the officials responsible for public security here, sir, and you will go through them all the way. Just look for it." "Okay, you try again." At this point, Jonah swallowed again and said, "Are the instant noodles in the ice cave? I'll cook another pack and eat it." Seeing that the other party went to get instant noodles to eat again, Henry secretly cursed the idiot in his heart, and then picked up the phone and dialed 112. "Hello, everyone, this is number 303, number 112 Tianyuan Street. Someone here wants to commit suicide. Please send a police officer quickly." "Okay sir, we'll send someone over right away." On the other side, Jonah had already taken out instant noodles and started cooking them skillfully. When he saw water flowing continuously from the tap and the hot water kettle automatically boiling water, he was amazed again. You craftsmen from this continent have really good skills, but as soon as he said this, he shook his head again. But if you spend all your energy on these little tricks and give up the great research on magic, you are still ignorant. Backward natives? After saying that, he lowered his head and poured the boiled water into the instant noodles. Smelling the fragrance of the instant noodles, he showed a satisfied smile. After being hungry for so long, I can finally eat something delicious. Henry was in no mood to argue with the lunatic in front of him about who was further behind. He just waited anxiously, hoping in his heart that the police would arrive quickly and arrest the lunatic in front of him. As for whether the guy in front of him is a real madman or a real mage, he really has no interest at all. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and Henry walked towards the door impatiently. "Sir, they should be here." "I'll open the door." Jonah didn't even look back, he was sitting on the sofa and eating instant noodles. Henry opened the door and saw 2 policemen standing outside. He said excitedly, "You two, he is a person with abilities and very aggressive. You should be careful." After that, he walked behind the 2 men. "Hide." The 2 of them glanced at Henry strangely, and then saw Jonah wearing a silk nightgown coming out, looking at the 2 of them with contempt and saying, "You two, take me to pick up your king or chief, if you want superlative." The older policeman smiled helplessly and said into the intercom, "It's okay, he seems to be a psychopath. We will come back after we solve it." Another younger policeman walked up and said, "Friend, who do you want to see?" "Take me to see the most senior official you can meet, and the kingdom will be better." At this point, Jonah was afraid that these natives would waste his time, so he decided to use his extraordinary power to scare them. He stretched out a hand, and as his palm opened, a spherical light group emerged from his palm, illuminating the entire room. Unexpectedly, his actions immediately aroused the vigilance of the 2 policemen. At the same time, he pulled out the pistol from his waist and pointed it at each other. You are really a person with abilities. The police pointed their guns at Jonah, and then shouted in accordance with the standards for criminals with abilities, no matter what you are going to do, stop quickly, put your head in your hands and squat down. There are still in your hands, put it away quickly, otherwise we will shoot. Jonah did not expect that his shocking behavior not only failed to arouse the other party's awe, but also made the other party feel hostile. Normally, as long as you reveal a light spell in front of civilians, wouldn't they immediately kneel down and worship you? He suddenly looked up at the lights on the roof and the other party's language, and felt a little enlightened. It seems that simple spells can't make the natives here surrender. They are so stupid and don't understand the greatness of magic at all. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in Jonah's eyes. Mortals, it seems that I have to teach you what awe is first. The next moment Jonah pointed out, an ice pick appeared out of thin air, fell down, and directly stabbed a hole in the young policeman's thigh. Seeing his colleague falling down screaming, the older policeman immediately shouted into the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, "Damn, it's a person with abilities. He hurt Joey. I need support." As he spoke, he had turned on the safety of the gun on his waist, and the camera on his other shoulder was also pointed at Jonah, uploading the scene to the police network. "You damn bastard!" The policeman pointed his gun at Jonah, but he saw a disdainful smile on Jonah's face as he walked towards him step by step. "I said don't move." He lowered the muzzle of the gun slightly, pointed it at Jonah's leg, and fired. The sudden sound of the pistol and the bullets coming out of the barrel obviously startled Jonah. He felt that he was being attacked, but he did not understand how the weapon in the opponent's hand was used to attack. But the opponent's attack obviously failed to break through the protective force field on his body, but instead aroused anger. "Civilian, you dare to attack a mage? I will imprison your soul in the body of a pig to let you know how rude and childish your actions are." At the same time, information about Jonah was spread around the world at the speed of light. About 2 minutes later, the news was sent to Li Anping in Tianjin. "Sir, we found him. Man at the top of the food chain." Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 385. "Have you found it?" Li Anping was standing on the clouds above Tianjin. He looked at Seagram, who was tightly grasped by the hands of the incarnation of mind energy in front of him, and turned his will into an electrical signal and sent it back. "Send someone to capture him. I want to live." As commanded. Seagram, who was being pinched tightly by the incarnation of Nian Qi, saw Li Anping's cold face and said with some fear, "What do you want?" He was chased by the incarnation of Nian Qi for several hours. Because his strength had shrunk significantly and his energy could not be effectively replenished, he finally failed to get rid of the opponent and was caught again. And sent it to Tianjin, in front of Li Anping. Li Anping grabbed Seagram's head. The other person's body was now reduced to the size of his palm. Not only did his head completely sink into Li Anping's palm, but even most of his body sank in. The incarnation of mind energy on the other side, after handing Seagram to Li Anping, flew in the direction of the boundary gate. Li Anping plans to imprison the other party personally from now on. Tell me why there are humans coming from the White Land, and why there are humans coming to the Earth through the World Transmigration Gate. Along with what Li Anping said, Li Anping's palms gradually tightened and squeezed Seagram's head, making a squeaking sound. Under his huge force, the other person's head seemed to feel like it would collapse anytime and anywhere. At this time, Li Anping had broken through the electromagnetic drive and reached the final stage of material reorganization. His strength was not the same as when he fought Seagram a few months ago. Now his strength, speed, and physical fitness have exceeded the 70 mark, from around 60 to reaching a strength of 71.2, a speed of 72.6, and a physical fitness of 70.1. At this point, it is extremely difficult to improve every attribute. I am afraid that even if Li Anping ate all the billions of people on the earth, he still would not be able to improve his attributes to 1.0. In contrast, the physical fitness has reached this point. It has completely transcended human understanding of living things. The electromagnetic drive allowed him to grasp the essence of power, and the reorganization of matter allowed Li Anping's body to evolve rapidly. Under self-adjustment, Li Anping can maintain his body at about 10 times the strength of ordinary people. Of course, at this time, his strength, speed, and physical fitness will all drop rapidly. It is far from reaching the level of 70 points, and the energy consumption will be greatly reduced. Once he enters a combat state, the instant material reorganization level transformation can make his body density even higher than that of Seagram. The hardness of his skin alone far exceeds that of diamonds, titanium alloys, and other hard materials known to humans, and his internal organs. Non-essential combat organs such as muscles were all replaced, the nervous system was completely replaced by electrical signals, and the circulatory and respiratory systems were replaced by more superior vacuum energy pathways. Once he enters the fighting state, every part of his body will become the most suitable form for fighting, and his physical attributes will also exceed the 70 mark. And as his knowledge increases, the transformation of this fighting state will become stronger and stronger. Facing Li Anping in this state, Seagram was squeezed by the opponent's huge force. I feel like my head is like a piece of scrap metal, and it seems that it will be squeezed to pieces at any time. Feeling that his head was beginning to be squeezed and deformed, even Seagram couldn't help but scream. He shouted, "How do I know how he got here?" Li Anping's eyes narrowed, and he saw a blue electric light flashing on his arm, and an even more terrifying force squeezed down, and Seagram's head made a clicking sound, and there was a split. "Asshole," Seagram roared angrily. Using his fastest speed, he transmitted everything he knew to Li Anping through electromagnetic waves. He is a human being from another world. On the White Land, those places where time and space are not stable can open the world gate, but some there will be a natural boundary gate in this place, and that's probably how he came here. Li Anping relaxed his grip slightly. I thought in my mind, there is still such a thing, it seems like we need to adjust our strategy. He glanced at Seagram, who was completely deformed in his palm, and said coldly, "From today on, you will be with me. If I find you are more than 10 meters away from me, I will kill your brains, pinch it out and eat it as jam on toast." Li Anping's words gave Seagram a chill, and as a devil, he couldn't help but tremble. This guy is more like a devil than me. And what's going on with his strength? This kind of combat power is comparable to that of a warrior who has just entered the 8th level. Thinking of this, Seagram's appearance became more honest. At least before the demons attacked, he no longer had any unnecessary thoughts. At the same time, in the towns of Codex country, Jonah began his adventure in a foreign continent. He was seen floating above the street, surrounded by evacuated people. There are also a few brave people who hide in corners and take pictures with their mobile phones. These damn natives. Jonah felt unhappy after thinking about what he had just experienced. He originally wanted to ask the police to take him to find their king, but he was brutally attacked by the other party. After he used a spell to deter him, the other party became even more excited. As a last resort, he killed the other party. Originally, this was not a big deal in his eyes. Killing a few mortals was something that every wizard had done. It was just that the identity of the other party's official made him feel a little troublesome. In order not to offend the wizards who might exist in the other party's kingdom, he directly used the splitting technique to decompose the other party's body into particles that were difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. According to him, the destruction of the body was so neat and tidy that the other party should not be able to find it. Who knew that he had only been in the room for a few minutes before the police came to find him again? As for Henry, he had escaped when he killed the police. After killing 5 more people, he knew that he should be exposed. Although he couldn't figure it out, he still planned to move to another location first. As a result, as soon as he flew out of the building, he was attacked frantically by the other party again. The natives here used a mechanism that could spray metal particles to attack. The speed of these metal particles was very fast, and even he could hardly see them clearly. Fortunately, their power was not great, at least they could not penetrate the protective force field on his body surface. The street was empty, with only numerous metal boxes flashing red and blue lights heading in his direction. The natives were riding in the boxes, and when they saw him, they came out of the boxes and attacked him. Countless metal particles hit his body, and it felt like being bitten by many mosquitoes. A flash of anger flashed in Jonah's eyes, and he roared, "You, these lowly ants! You don't understand what you are facing at all." Accompanied by his roar, a blue halo composed purely of cold air spread out in all directions with his body as the center. In just a few seconds, all the surrounding materials within hundreds of meters were frozen. Some of the armed police officers who got out of the police car were directly frozen into ice sculptures, while others retreated quickly. Retreat. Ordinary light weapons are ineffective. The target has ultra-low temperature ability. Where are our ability users? Why haven't they arrived yet? Looking at the policemen who were beaten to pieces by him, Jonah laughed, "Mortals, prepare to bear the wrath of the wizard." The next moment, as a few mysterious bites came out of his mouth, a cold wind suddenly rolled up in the sky. The next moment, countless hailstones the size of human heads were already like artillery shells hitting the police and police cars that continued to rush in from a distance. The huge kinetic energy directly deformed the car. The ordinary policemen were torn apart by a slight touch, and the cold air contained in the hailstones lowered the temperature around them again. People seemed to have arrived in Antarctica in an instant. Damn it, an armed policeman who came over took out a rocket launcher directly from the car. This kind of firepower specially used for anti-tank is far from comparable to the previous bullets. Originally, it was impossible for ordinary armed policemen in the Code Country to be equipped with rockets. However, in the past 6 months, under the rule of the Pan-Continental Alliance, the entire Earth has greatly increased its investment in the military, and all weapons and equipment are being upgraded almost every day. Therefore, the rocket in the hands of the armed police originally belonged to a certain army of the Codex state, but now it has been eliminated because it is too backward and given to the armed police. On the other side, when Jonah saw a rocket flying towards his position, he was stunned and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Portable bed crossbow, interesting, but with such a slow speed, I'm afraid the power is not as great as the metal particles I have seen. So, he watched the rocket hit the protective force field on his body. Boom! It was like a firework blooming in the sky, and the huge impact force directly knocked Jonah out. You must know that this kind of rocket is specially used to deal with tanks and destroy fortifications. Although Jonah's body was not damaged too much under the protection of the defensive force field, he still shot out like a ball and crashed into a building. The whole brain was buzzing, and there was a slight concussion. In the ruins, Jonah slowly stood up, with crazy anger in his eyes. He was actually beaten away by a mortal. This was simply a great shame. You lowly, despicable, stupid mortals. You have completely angered a mage. At this moment, a sharp sound of breaking through the air sounded in the sky. As a fighter plane passed over the sky of the town, 2 black figures jumped down from the sky. Daxia Dragon Bird. Seeing such an arrogant appearance, the armed police holding rockets were shocked. Although they didn't know why the people who came to support the incident in the Western continent were not the ability users of the Virtual Number Agency, but the people of Daxia Dragon Bird, but since the ability users sent by the government to support them have arrived, it means that they have nothing to do. The ability user who made trouble didn't die after being hit by a rocket. He didn't want to continue fighting with this monster. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lango. Chapter 386. The two people who jumped off the fighter plane were wrapped in a layer of silver-white battle clothes. This is the latest nano-armor developed by the Royal Academy of Sciences. After wearing it, it can not only greatly enhance the muscular endurance and sensitivity of the wearer, but it also has various anti-impact, bulletproof, anti-magnetic, anti-explosion, and anti-high and low temperature functions. Not only that, it is also equipped with thermal sensing, radar, thermal imaging, night vision, sonar and other functions, which makes tracking or sneaking like a game. In addition, it is equipped with an intelligent medical device, which can inject analgesics, hemostatic drugs, and even epinephrine when the wearer is injured, unconscious, or needed. Coupled with a series of functions and weapons specially configured for people with different abilities, this set of nano armor has become a real individual king. Even an ordinary person can turn into a Superman in an instant after wearing it, not to mention they are now worn on the hands of the two dragon bird guards. I saw two people falling from the sky and hitting the street on the ground like two meteorites. The ground where their feet hit directly cracked into a big crater. One of them raised his head, and a red light flashed on his silver-white mask. Jonah in the ruins appeared in front of him in thermal imaging mode. We found the target, 120 meters ahead. As he said that, he took out something like a flashlight from his belt, and the next moment a white light emerged from the flashlight. It was a laminar arc plasma beam, which bound the plasma beam with electromagnetic force and produced a lightsaber. Originally this was a weapon belonging to the Federation Cobra Force, but now it has been modified by the Royal Academy of Sciences to become more powerful and more durable. The beam can fight at temperatures of 20,000 degrees Celsius for 3 hours. A lightsaber formed at such a high temperature is enough to cut through most of the natural materials on Earth. One of the dragon bird guards who came to capture Jonah this time was Fang Heja, who had just graduated from school. He pulled out the lightsaber from his waist and made a charging movement. "Captain, I'll go first." Another dragon bird guard dusted himself off. There was no expression on the face covered by the nano armor. "Be careful, the target has level 4 or higher freezing abilities, and the possibility of level 5 ability users cannot be ruled out." Understood. After saying this, Fang Heja exerted force on his feet. His strength, which was already far beyond that of ordinary people, directly reached superhuman levels due to the impact of the nano armor on the joints, and there was a loud bang. His whole body was like a cannonball, turning into a black line and rushing towards Jonah. Fang Heja's ability is what he calls virtualization. He can freely control it, causing his body and the materials in contact with his body to be in a state of virtualization. In this state, his body and the materials he controls will be completely unaffected by the real world, becoming a ghost-like state. Any matter will pass directly through his body without affecting him. And because he cannot be affected by matter, his entire body will move forward with the inertia of motion before the virtualization. For example, if it is falling, it will keep falling. Even if it falls on the ground, it will continue to fall through the ground. Until Fang Heja lifted the virtual state. As soon as he sprinted, his entire body, nano armor, and lightsaber entered the virtual state together, and rushed in the direction of Jonah with the inertia of the previous sprint. He ignored any obstacles along the way and passed through them like a ghost. For Fang Heja, the distance of 120 meters was almost covered in just one breath. In the blink of an eye, the lightsaber in his hand brought up a screen of light and slashed towards Jonah in front of him. Ah! I didn't expect that the opponent's offensive would be so weird and fast. Moreover, there were no magic fluctuations. They were two different creatures from the warlock in Jonah's memory. He only had time to scream and sprayed bursts of cold air from his hands towards Fang Heja. But Fang Heja's disembodied body was like a ghost. The violent cold air had no effect on him at all. His whole body had passed through Jonah's body, and then he turned around. The virtual body turned into a solid body again, and the whole person's legs suddenly kicked the ground and stopped. And Jonah screamed, looking at his right hand that had been chopped off by the lightsaber with a horrified look on his face. Just when Fanghaja passed through his body, the virtual body turned into a physical entity in an instant and then became virtual again. At that moment, he had already cut off one of Jonah's hands. The protective force field was enough to withstand rockets, but it couldn't stop the lightsaber's slashes. Fanghaja's virtualization ability itself is also a very strange and powerful ability. The most important thing about this ability is to seize the opportunity between virtualization and reality. Jonah suffered a loss precisely because of information asymmetry. Or if he was in perfect condition, he might not be severely injured by Fanghaja in one blow. Damn it, this damn native, if it weren't for all my magic equipment being confiscated by the guild. Although he was unwilling to admit it, Jonah had to admit that the two natives in front of him had the ability to threaten his life. Run away first, and then deal with them when you have recovered. Thinking of this, Jonah reluctantly cast a healing spell, and then his whole body rose into the sky, trying to escape. At the same time, his body has gradually dissipated into the air, which is the invisibility technique. But his invisibility technique is just a simple distortion of light, and he cannot avoid the multiple monitoring of nano armor at all. Just as he soared into the sky, another dragon bird guard appeared behind him. As he raised his right hand, a strong purple light completely covered his fist. As he punched out, the purple light had turned into a physical existence, like a purple shockwave, knocking Jonah directly to the ground. That was Hansen, who was rescued from the underworld by Li Enping. His ability was to turn physical strength into a physical attack. After he punched out, he slowly fell from the air. Fanghaja rushed towards Jonah, who fell to the ground again. Only a shocking roar came out of Jonah's mouth, "Get out of my way." In an instant, countless moisture in the air turned into ice spikes all over the sky under the influence of a mysterious force. Each ice spike was only the size of a thumb, but the cold air contained in it was enough to freeze a small river into ice. And now there are thousands and thousands of such water droplets in the air. Inside the Daxia dragon bird base. The scene ended here. Li Enping looked at Bai Xing beside him and asked, "What happened later?" Hansen was seriously injured, but he was protected by the nano armor and received first aid, so he was not in danger of death. Bai Xing said, "Fanghaja has the ability to become a virtual person. He took advantage of the opponent's weakness and caught the target. Although he avoided the initial attack, he still suffered severe frostbite when he turned into a physical body to attack." Li Enping nodded, "Take good care of them and reward them." "Yes. What do you think?" Li Enping raised his head and pointed at Jonah on the screen. "It seems to be some kind of explosive method." After the opponent used this trick, the protective force field on the surface of the body has disappeared. Bai Xing manipulated the remote control in his hand, and the screen switched to a small room. Jonah was imprisoned here. He put on the white prison uniform again and wore a black collar around his neck. That is a special electric shock collar made by Daxia Lonke. It will monitor the wearer's heartbeat and brain waves. Once it exceeds a certain set threshold, it will release current. Once the opponent's brain waves or heartbeat continue to increase, the power of this current will continue to increase until the wearer dies or the heartbeat and brain waves return to normal. This collar is very useful for some field system, parasitic system, and blood system ability users. Because when they use their abilities, either their heartbeat is burdened or their brain waves are particularly active. Even when other ability users do not use their abilities, they will be shocked because they are just overthinking or fighting. Now Jonah is wearing such a thing. For a wizard like him who does not use magic and is not much different from ordinary people, this thing has completely turned him into an ordinary person. Looking at Jonah, who was dejected in the cell, Li Enping asked, "Did you find out anything?" Bai Xing shook his head, "Not yet. I want to ask, Your Majesty, can you read his thoughts?" "No," Li Enping answered directly, "the mental force field does have the ability to read minds, but this guy has some kind of protection in his head. Once invaded by alien mental power, it will self-destruct if it cannot defend. Although I may not fail if I take action, it is not worth the risk. After all, he has fallen into our hands, and there are too many ways to get information. Bai Xing nodded and said, "Then your majesty, do we need to use more extreme means? I mean, after getting all the information from him, do we still need this person? It doesn't matter whether he lives or dies." A trace of murderous intent flashed in Li Anping's eyes. The murders he committed in the Code country alone are enough for him to die 10 times. I understand. Inside the cell, 2 soldiers suddenly rushed in, one held Jonah, and the other pulled out his intact left hand. "What are you going to do?" As Jonah struggled, one of them directly injected a tube of white reagent into his body through a syringe from his left hand. Then they left. "Poison," Jonah sneered in his heart, "you underestimate the will of the mage. In order to pursue the power and knowledge of magic, we have experienced the hardships on this road, and our willpower has long been tempered like steel." But the next moment, an unprecedented intense pleasure hit Jonah's whole body, accompanied by various illusions, which made Jonah feel like he was flying in the air. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 387. A few days later, Jonah was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling blankly. There was constant mucus left in his nostrils, his pupils were dilated, his body hair stood up, and he was in a daze. The most uncomfortable thing was that he felt like there was something missing all over his body. What? He thought again of what the natives had injected into him a few days ago. The feeling was so comfortable. At this time, 2 more soldiers opened the cell door and walked in. Behind them is Yang Guang, who is in charge of this interrogation. Ever since Yajiao Sheng took charge of the school for ability users and Bai Xing became the new leader of Daxia Longke, Yang Guang has become the current second leader of Daxia Longke. This time it was also because Li Anping was very concerned about the guy who came out of the boundary gate, so he came to personally investigate. But Jonah on the bed just glanced at him sideways from the corner of his eyes and said nothing. Yang Guang didn't take it seriously either. Based on Henry's confession, they had a general understanding of Jonah's character and origins. That's why we have the current plan. Yang Guang took out an injection from his hand and kept playing with it. Jonah on the bed immediately sat up after seeing the injection in Yang Guang's hand. He stared at the injection with his eyes, feeling the commotion in his body, and already had a vague guess about what he had been injected with. But it was useless. Although he knew that injecting such a thing was definitely not good, the growing commotion in his body made him tremble all over. His eyes were fixed on the rolling injection in Yang Guang's hand. "Want it?" Yang Guang looked at his silent look and smiled. "Can you use it?" He moved his chin and instructed the soldier on the side, "Teach him how to inject." The soldier on the side took the needle, walked towards Jonah, and pulled out his left arm again. Jonah wanted to resist and struggle, but the needle seemed to have some kind of magic power, shattering the last struggle in his heart. The white medicine was injected into Jonah's body again, and he let out a burst of shenayan from his mouth. The whole person was already lying on the bed. There was a blurred look in his eyes, and he felt as if he was flying. Yang Guang looked at Jonah's appearance, smiled and left. In the next few days, Jonah was injected with medicine every day, and the amount of medicine injected became larger and larger. It was not until 5 days later that the Daxia Longke people suddenly stopped injecting. Bang! Jonah banged his head against the wall, but the pain was nothing compared to the sensation. The numbness and turmoil in his body made him even more uncomfortable. "Give me." There was another thud, and he banged his head against the wall again. "Give me the medicine." Bang! "Give me the medicine." Behind the screen, Yang Guang asked the guard on the side, "How long has he been like this?" "Probably more than 3 hours. Do you want us to stop him?" Yang Guang smiled, that's almost it. Let's go and have a look. When Yang Guang walked into the cell again this time, Jonah immediately stopped banging his head and turned to look at him. At this moment, he looked much more depressed than when he first arrived on Earth. Not only were his eyes dull, but there was also an aura of decadence permeating his body. Yang Guang raised his right hand, revealing a tube of injection on his palm. He once again said the same words as a few days ago, "Want it? Give it to me." When he saw the injection, Jonah roared wildly and rushed forward, trying to snatch the injection in Yang Guang's hand. However, before he could get close, he was kicked back by the soldier beside Yang Guang and fell to the ground. Being kicked away by a mortal, Jonah would have been furious before, but now he just raised his head quickly. With snot and tears on his face, he looked at Yang Guang and said, "Please, give me the medicine." Yang Guang looked at Jonah coldly, stepped on him, and dangled the injection in front of his eyes. "Scum, you want this, right? Just answer a few questions. What do you want to ask? Where are you from?" Jonah struggled for a moment, and his inner strength was quickly shattered by the turmoil inside his body. "Saint Laurent Empire." After saying this, there was a trace of sadness in Jonah's heart, and his pride as a mage seemed to be torn to pieces at this moment, and a tear dropped uncontrollably from the corner of his eye to the floor. Yang Guang smiled, "Very good, next question. What is the magic you are talking about?" "Codex country, under the frozen ocean. The incarnation of Nian Qi is building the submarine base here alone. Although the incarnation of Nian Qi cannot store electromagnetic force in his body and cannot achieve the ability to reorganize the body's matter, with superhuman speed and strength, he can build it very fast. In just a few days, the submarine base has been basically restored to its original state. But this is just the beginning. Li Enping originally planned to build the outpost to the opposite side of the boundary crossing gate, to the White Earth. After some time, after some technologies from the Royal Academy of Sciences were perfected. At least in this way, the battlefield could be placed on the White Earth, without endangering the Earth. But now with the appearance of Jonah, this plan is disrupted. Li Enping planned to take some time to visit the White Land, and then start to establish an outpost near the boundary crossing gate opposite. As for the undersea base, the entire boundary gate will be wrapped in the undersea base, and then a jump gate will be built so that the human army can march straight in. While he was building, Yang Guang also sent a report about Jonah. "Sir, according to his confession, he came from a continent called Mondo, which has about 20 countries. Jonah came from an empire called Saint Laurent, which is also one of the most powerful countries on the Mondo continent. Their level of civilization is roughly equivalent to our Middle Ages, and they still rely mainly on animal power. I have sent you the relevant situation and information about various countries in the continent that Jonah knows." As he said, Yang Guang opened a document on the computer. According to Jonah, he was originally on the run, but he accidentally entered a portal and arrived at the White Land, and then entered another portal and arrived at Earth. He currently thinks that he is just in a different continent of the same world. There is a supernatural power called magic in their place. Magic is divided into 10 levels, from the most basic illumination to the 10th level of time stillness. This document contains all the magic he knows and their respective effects provided by Jonah. Li Enping glanced at it and heard Yang Guang continue, "These magics, according to their classification, have a total of 8 factions, including destruction, protection, change, arcane, prophecy, necromancy, life and alchemy. In addition, there are supernatural powers called druids, warlocks, knights, etc. on this continent. However, among all the supernatural powers, the power and influence of the mage are still the greatest." Li Enping nodded and asked, "Then how do their power levels compare to those with abilities here?" "It's hard to say." Yang Guang frowned. "There is too little information about mages. We can only make a rough judgment based on Jonah's performance and confession. There are 4 levels of mages, which are divided into apprentices, lower mages, upper mages and wizards according to the different magic powers and the number of magics they master. Jonah is an upper mage. According to his performance, his destructive power is close to some level 5 ability users, or even exceeds it. But his performance in other aspects is too poor. However, according to him, if he is fully equipped, his strength will be greatly improved. Based on the information he provided, we roughly estimated that mages have stronger comprehensive abilities than ability users because they have mastered different spell powers, especially upper mages and wizards. When they are well prepared, their destructive power and escape ability are very amazing, which is more difficult to deal with than most level 5 ability users. Next, Yang Guang reported for almost 3 hours. After all, there is too much intelligence on a continent, including the power of magic, the approximate number of wizards, the strength of various countries, and the extraordinary power of magic itself, etc. This is still the information that most of it has been received by Li Anping in the form of reading. Fortunately, Jonah is a wizard with a sufficient reserve of knowledge, so he can bring them so much information. Just as Li Anping was listening carefully to Yang Guang's report on magic, the incarnation of mind energy had already rebuilt the entire submarine base. The gate that originally stood on the mud and sand on the seabed has been completely wrapped by the base, and the surrounding sea water has been drained away. The entire space is in a metal hall. More than 100 meters away from the gate, in the same metal hall, is the folding gate made by Li Anping. In addition, there are various engineering robots that are continuing to manufacture various living facilities, monitoring devices, and fire power systems. While Li Anping's main body continued to listen to Yang Guang's report, the incarnation of mind energy walked step by step to the location of the gate, and then stretched his head over. It felt like passing through a certain membrane, and appearing in front of the incarnation of mind energy, an endless white land. The ground is completely made up of pieces of white sand, and a bright sun hangs in the sky, emitting endless light and heat. But these were not what Li Anping was most concerned about. What concerned him most was that a lavender-colored gate was standing quietly in front of his head, about 300 meters away. Thinking of Seagram's words, Li Anping frowned. So that's how it is. A gate was naturally generated at this time and place. The 2 gates standing quietly on the white land symbolized that 2 completely different and strange civilizations were about to start an unprecedented huge collision. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 388. On the Mondo continent, in an ordinary village. The originally peaceful village was now shrouded in flames. The bodies of dozens of women, old and young, were piled up in the center of the square in the small village. Kudia held a teenage boy upside down in his hands, walked towards Shang Tian in front of the pile of corpses, and asked, "Is it him?" Shang Tian looked back and shook his head. Kudia laughed ferociously, pierced the boy's chest with the dagger in his hand, and then threw the body on the ground. At this moment, both Shang Tian and Kudia were wearing coarse cloth clothes, looking like they were playing a medieval movie on a certain studio. In addition to them, there were a dozen men and women wearing similar coarse cloth, seemingly searching for something in the village. And in this village, everyone from the residents to the chickens and ducks were killed by them. I saw Ye Beast suddenly shouting, "Found it?" Then I saw him grabbing a teenage boy who looked pretty and handsome, and asked Shang Tian, "Xiao Tian, is it him?" Shang Tian glanced at the young man, walked forward, and suddenly pulled open the young man's collar, and he could see a blue pendant hanging around his neck. He laughed, "That's him." Then he saw him nodding towards the night beast on the side, and then the night beast stabbed out with one finger, and the finger of the wielder of mind energy directly pierced the back of the opponent's head. "Okay, is this the country kid you want us to find?" Kudia said impatiently, "just for us to kill him?" Of course it's not that simple, Shang Tian said to a woman walking aside. Dong use nanobugs to transform my body into his. The beautiful girl standing next to him with a cold face was the God King's former maid, Dong who later took Tian Hao into Tyrell. At this moment, her appearance is still the same as before, but she has changed into a coarse cloth skirt like that of a medieval woman. Hearing what Shang Tian said, she looked at the boy's body on the ground, then looked at Shang Tian and said, "Your body shapes are too different. It's like using nanobugs." "I know, so what I want is not disguise, but transformation. Make every part of my body look like him as much as possible." Shang Tian looked at Dong and said, "This will not only allow me to impersonate him, but also it can enhance my physical fitness in all aspects. I know your skills can do this." Dong frowned. "Give me 3 days. I will build a simple operating room near here to help you perform transformation surgery." "Thank you," Shang Tian smiled. "Also, I want to strengthen my muscles and bones, and simulate the nerve plexus. This will help me practice magic in the future." Dong gave him a strange look, as if he didn't expect that the other party knew so much about his technology. Then Shang Tian looked at the other men and women around him and said, "The matter here is over, then everyone should act according to the plan." The next moment, these dozen men and women had dispersed. They followed Shang Tian's instructions, or went to some ancient ruins, battlefields, and secret realms in the Mondo continent to collect various secret treasures, artifacts, and lost magic. Or unite some powerful creatures through some messages from Shang Tian. An unprecedented large-scale search will begin on the Mondo continent. As for Shang Tian himself, he, Kudia, Yeju, and Dong will use his transformed body to pretend to be a young man to meet his father, who even the young man himself doesn't know yet. The strongest man on the Mondo continent, the demigod Dionysus. Shang Tian replaced this young man who would be famous in Mondo continent in the future. And after meeting Dionysus, he will receive an unprecedented inclination of resources, enter a period of rapid growth in power, and have the right to speak in all countries of the entire Mondo continent. On the other side, after Li Anping discovered the existence of the magical world, the entire human society was also mobilized. The heads of state have already been informed by Li Anping of the existence of demons and the White Land, and now the so-called magical world has appeared. As a result, all kinds of information about the magical world were mobilized into their hands, and soon a series of plans were made from various aspects, waiting for Li Anping's choice. Li Anping did not adopt those attempts to exchange and unite, or the idea of sending troops directly to conquer. He planned to establish human outposts on the White Land and the bottom of the sea, and at the same time select more than 10 people to form an expedition team, blend into the magical world, and see what the other side's world is like, such as the environment. What ordinary humans can't survive there. Are the human beings there structurally different from the human beings on Earth? There is also the military strength of the other country, the relationship between their countries, etc. You cannot just listen to Jonah's words. After all, he is just a person, and he may not know much of the information himself. Or what you know is wrong. Facing a strange world and a strange civilization, Li Anping decided to be more cautious. Therefore, while he planned to send out an expedition team, he also had to assemble an army to be on standby at any time. Now with the existence of the jump gate, as long as the army is assembled, they can pass through the boundary gate to reach the Mondo continent at any time. In the study room of the palace, the pale Jonah was brought in by Yang Guang. Li Anping glanced at him and said to SpecialAbilities beside him, "Let's leave it at that for the human armed forces. Be ready to attack at any time." "I understand." SpecialAbilities nodded and left the study room. Before leaving, he also glanced at Jonah, obviously full of curiosity about this legendary wizard. As the third largest ability organization under Li Anping, in addition to Daxia Dragonbird and Virtual Number Agency, the human armed forces are mainly prepared for large-scale wars. Most of them are field ability users, and the training goals are mainly lethality and coordination. In terms of single combat and small-scale group battles, they may not be as good as Daxia Dragonbird and Virtual Number Agency. But once they cooperate with the army and fight a battle of more than 10,000 people, their role will far exceed the latter two. After all, human war weapons are already very powerful. Now, under the leadership of the Royal Academy of Sciences and Li Anping, the weapons are becoming more and more advanced. Facing such an army, even a level 5 ability user can no longer completely ignore it. Yang Guang bowed respectfully, "Your Majesty, he is Jonah." Jonah glanced at Li Anping, who looked like an ordinary man. Compared with the king in front of him, the incredible skyscrapers he had seen along the way attracted his attention more. Li Anping didn't care about Jonah's rudeness. He waved his hand and said to Yang Guang, "Okay, you go first, I'll talk to him alone." Jonah looked at Li Anping and Yang Guang strangely. He didn't expect that the other party would dare to talk to him alone. He quickly thought of the collar on his neck and understood. Now, as long as he has the slightest intention to attack or release magic, the current released from his neck will knock him out. On the other side, Li Anping looked at the silent Jonah and said, "I asked you to come here this time mainly to see magic." "Oh, by the way," Li Anping looked at the collar on Jonah's neck and said, "You can't release magic with this thing, right?" He snapped his fingers, and the collar broke into two pieces and fell to the ground. "Okay, just cast a spell for me." Jonah looked at Li Anping in disbelief, then touched his neck. The collar that had kept him like a puppy had disappeared. The next moment, he looked at Li Anping with a crazy look on his face, and that trace of hideousness seemed like a devil from hell. He first cast a lighting spell and saw a little light generated from his palm, and his body was indeed not shocked. He turned his head, looked at Li Anping and said, "Mortal, you made the stupidest decision in your life." The next moment, the sudden burst of cold air, carrying the resentment that Jonah had accumulated during this period, rushed towards Li Anping fiercely. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 389. The cold air that Jonah exhaled was enough to freeze an ordinary person to death in an instant, but as soon as the cold air came out, Li Anping took a deep breath. The next moment, all the white cold air rushed towards Li Anping's mouth and was sucked into his lungs. Jonah, who was standing aside, looked at Li Anping stupidly as he sucked away the ice shock he released. To be honest, Jonah was a high-ranking mage in Mondo Continent. Before he was captured, he was also a member of the Palace Mage Corps and had seen countless strong men. Many of them could resist his ice shock, but if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that someone like Li Anping could break his attack with just a breath. The other party's body was as strong as the legendary ancient dragon. On the other side, Li Anping had been quietly observing the other party's magic release process. Just as the opponent was spewing cold air, he could clearly sense that several nodes on the opponent's body, from the forehead to the navel, began to spin faster, and the torsion field generated by it caused some kind of electrochemical process, which then stimulated the vacuum, thereby extracting zero-point energy. Interesting ability. Li Anping looked at Jonah and said, "Show me another magic." The opponent's magic ability was completely different from what he expected. He didn't expect it to use vacuum zero-point energy. The so-called vacuum zero-point energy is a kind of energy that exists in a vacuum. This is an energy imagined from the uncertainty principle, one of the cornerstones of quantum theory, and was later confirmed by experiments. In quantum field theory, the fabric of space can be regarded as composed of places, and the field is a quantized simple harmonic oscillator at each point in time and space, and there is interaction between adjacent oscillators. In this case, each point in space has its own contribution, resulting in technically infinite zero-point energy. In the eyes of Li Anping, who has mastered electromagnetic force, strong interaction force and weak interaction force, the entire vacuum, the entire universe is full of fluctuating energy seas. In every tiny period of time, countless energies disappear or appear in the space. In the eyes of magicians, this is the omnipresent magic element, the source of their magic release. But unlike Li Anping, who stimulates the vacuum and extracts zero-point energy through the collision of high-energy particles, Jonah in front of him extracts vacuum energy through the spin of his own particles, using the torsion field mechanism. When Jonah heard Li Anping say to do it again, he put away the surprised expression on his face, raised his hands, and began to spit out mysterious bites from his mouth. At the same time, countless cold air appeared around, and a huge ice cone appeared above Jonah's head. Like a huge battering ram, it was aimed at Li Anping's position. Oh! Can you also increase your power through language and meditation? Just as Li Anping finished the sentence, a huge ice cone over 4 meters long had already hit Li Anping's position fiercely. Wherever the ice cone passed, white air was left in the air. This big ice cone has both physical and ice attacks, and once it hits the target, it will explode like a bomb. When it produces double physical damage, it freezes the opponent with amazing cold air. It's like a popsicle being smashed by a hammer. After Jonah released this magic, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He was too weak now. But he still raised his head and looked at Li Anping's position, so the next moment, his pupils continued to expand again, as if he saw a miracle. Facing the huge ice cone that hit like a train, Li Anping just gently extended a finger and tapped the front of the ice cone. Just like pressing the pause button on the movie, the ice cone that was like a meteor falling from the sky in the last second has completely stopped in mid-air at this moment. Then it completely shattered and turned into countless ice chips scattered in the air. Okay, let's stop the magic test here. Li Anping stretched out his hand towards Jonah, and black energy emerged from his palm. So, can you feel the energy? When the black energy appeared in Li Anping's palm, Jonah's face changed, and he couldn't help but take a step back and said, "What kind of power is this? Such evil. Energy is the unity of body and spirit. Every ability user's energy is full of his own will." When Jonah saw the other party's black energy, it was like feeling that hell appeared in the world. In the other party's power, he only felt countless deaths, destruction, despair, and fear. It was like countless undead screaming in his ears. Sure enough, can you also feel the energy? But it seems that you have to release a lot of energy to feel it. Looking at Jonah, Li Anping raised his hands, and a trace of black energy rose from his arms like a black flame, burning like a flame. According to you, the strongest mages in your area are called wizards, and the strongest among the wizards is Dionysus, who is called a demigod by the world. The next moment, the black energy had spread all over Li Anping's body, and then it rushed in all directions like a volcanic eruption. At this moment, all the ability users in Tianjing couldn't help but look in the direction of the palace. Each of them could feel that a terrifying power was rising from there. Jonah was completely surrounded by the black aura. He looked at Li Anping in disbelief. This guy, who he had previously regarded as a mortal, was now showing a power that was completely above his. Li Anping looked at Jonah and said, "Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen Dionysus? Do you think who is stronger, me or him?" Feeling the aura displayed by Li Anping and the breath like hell, Jonah had to hold on so that he would not fall to the ground under the pressure of this breath. Facing the strong man who showed extraordinary power in front of him, he spoke slowly in an unprecedented calm tone, "Your power is indeed very strong. It may be the strongest among all the mages I have ever seen. But if you want to compare with Lord Dionysus, it is like a firefly in the bushes trying to compare with the moon in the sky." Is that so? Hearing what Jonah said, Li Anping was not angry, and there was no change on his face. He just put his hands down. The black aura that filled the surroundings also began to slowly dissipate. Okay, I'm fine. As he spoke, Li Anping pointed his finger lightly, and the electric shock collar that had broken into two pieces and fell to the ground flew up by itself and buckled on Jonah's hand again. Send him away. The guards outside the door came in and took Jonah away. Yang Guang also came in. After glancing at Jonah, who was taken out, he respectfully said to Li Anping, "Sir, about the question of magic." Li Anping shook his head. "Ordinary people, no, it should be said that people here basically can't learn it. Their magic is essentially a kind of ability. You can think of them as people with abilities. The ability is to extract vacuum zero-point energy, and the so-called magic is just a different way of using zero-point energy. I can use it myself, but magic can't be promoted here." He looked at Yang Guang and said, "Then let him tell the detailed effects of each magic, and then reveal the information about magic to SpecialAbilities and others. I want the senior officers in the army to understand every magic. This way, if we fight in the future, we can know ourselves and the enemy." Yang Guang heard what Li Anping said. He immediately asked, "Sir, do you think we will fight with them?" "I have a hunch." In Li Anping's eyes, there seemed to be countless stars and data flowing. "There will be a battle between us and them." Yang Guang nodded and took out a list from his arms. "Sir, these are the members selected from the Great Xia Dragon Bird, who will participate in this investigation of the magic world. Lord Baizing asked me to take it to you for review. You just need to grasp this kind of thing. Why do you want me to see it?" Although Li Anping said so, he still took the list from Yang Guang's hand. The next second, he already knew why Baizing wanted to show him the list. He pointed to Li Qian's name on it and said, "Who asked her to go?" Yang Guang couldn't hear any tone from Li Anping's mouth, so he could only say more respectfully, "It was Miss Li Qian who insisted on going by herself." As Li Anping's nominal woman, Li Qian's position in the Great Xia Dragon Bird has always been very complicated, in addition to being responsible for intelligence work. Baizing usually wouldn't give her any other work, let alone such a dangerous task as investigating the magic world. This time, Li Qian asked to join the investigation team on her own, which Baizing thought was a woman throwing a tantrum. He naturally wouldn't argue with Li Qian himself, but directly kicked the ball to Li Anping. Li Anping looked at the remaining people on the list. He said to Yang Guang, "Add Yan Bei, Jing Guang, and Fang Hejia, and ask them to come to me in 3 days. Then he pointed to Li Qian's name on the list and said, "Remove her name and ask her to come to see me now." "Yes, sir." With that, Yang Guang bowed and left. An hour later, Li Qian, who had dressed up carefully, slowly walked into Li Anping's study. At this time, she had long black and shiny hair, and a blue and white Daxia dragon bird uniform. Under her own changes, she was serious and playful. A pair of blue stockings with her slender legs can arouse the reverie of countless people. However, since entering the palace, her face has been very cold, as if it were ice that had not melted for 10,000 years, so that people who wanted to greet her along the way did not dare to come up. Opening the door of the study, Li Qian saw Li Anping sitting behind the desk, with several brick-sized books floating around him and turning pages. "You're here." Li Anping raised his head and glanced at Li Qian, and all the books around him automatically flew back to the bookshelf. He stood up and walked towards Li Qian. "How are you recently? Are you busy with work?" Li Qian turned her head away and said lightly, "How long have we not seen each other?" 5 months, 12 days, 3 hours, and 47 minutes. "Enough, you still remember that we haven't seen each other for such a long time." Li Qian raised her head, tears faintly flowing in her eyes. "What on earth are you?" Li Anping didn't let him finish the rest of the words, and hugged her directly, holding her tightly in his arms. Li Qian, who was originally on edge, immediately panicked, and her delicate cheeks flushed a little. Li Anping's breath suddenly filled her body, and his voice turned into a stream of hot air, ringing in her ears. "I'm sorry, I'm really busy lately. Don't go to the magic world this time." Li Qian stayed in Li Anping's arms, feeling as if she had turned into a piece of soft candy, and hummed softly, hum. Li Anping looked at Li Qian, who closed her eyes in his arms, and did not take any further action. For this woman who has been following him from the beginning, Li Anping was unwilling to use any special methods to control her unless it was the last moment. And now that the Prophet system and the global intelligence network have gradually unified, Li Anping had a new idea in his mind about Li Qian's placement. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 390. Feeling the gentle body in his arms, the mental force field swept away, and Li Anping had a clear understanding of Li Qian's current physical condition. Although Li Qian at this time has not practiced as hard as Jing Guang and Yan Bei, but with the various resources of Daxia Lonke, such as Immortality Potion, Function Enhancer, Ten-Fist Sword, etc., she has reached the third level at this moment. 3 energy levels. Li Anping thought for a moment and stroked Li Qian's back, making her hum like a kitten. Li Anping asked softly in Li Qian's ear, "Lu Feng will go to Mondo continent with the expedition team to collect intelligence this time. After he leaves, you can take charge of the work of the intelligence department in his place." But I have never done such a thing," Li Qian said somewhat unconfidently. Although she was placed very high in the great Xiaolonke, she had never been a leader with real power. She only used her abilities to monitor others. Li Anping flipped Li Qian's hair, looked directly at her face, and said slowly, "You are the person I trust most. From now on, be my eyes and ears." After hearing what Li Anping said, Li Qian felt excited. She nodded firmly and said, "Yes. The current intelligence department has been integrated with the central computer built by Momo, and everything has detailed rules and regulations. The dependence of the entire department on the quality of the leader has been minimized. What matters most is the degree of loyalty." Moreover, Li Anping knew that Li Qian had no talent in ability development and combat, so being in charge of intelligence work was more suitable for her. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Then you can live in the palace starting from today. There is a jump door directly to the base, which is very convenient." "Well, I listened to you." Li Qian lowered her head and felt that her cheeks had become hot. Li Anping let go of Li Qian and snapped his fingers with his right hand. I saw an electric spark sound at his fingertips. As the electromagnetic signal spread, Xiao Suesu and others near the study had received the news. When they walked in, Li Anping said, "Please arrange a room for Li Qian. She will live in the palace from today on." Xiao Suesu and others glanced at Li Qian with jealousy. Although they had been taking care of Li Anping's daily life in the palace, they were personal maids and personal secretaries. But as Li Anping became stronger and stronger, his body structure became more and more separated from human structure. He basically no longer needs food and sleep. The brain's memory and calculation power are better than those of computers. Xiao Suesu and others can rarely talk to Li Anping. After Li Qian left, Seagram's head slowly stretched out from under the table. He glanced at Li Anping with evil intentions. "Are you deceiving this female?" Li Anping glanced at Seagram, and with just one look, the other person's head seemed to have been hit hard, and he fell to the ground with a scream. A huge crack appeared on his forehead. "From today on, except that you are not allowed to appear in front of others, you are not allowed to say a word without my order." In this way, Li Qian settled in the palace and began to slowly take over the work of the intelligence department from Lu Feng. Human beings have also begun intensive preparations for the magical world. Within the hospital ward of Daxia Lonke, there was a snap. Hansen retracted his hand sarcastically, and the nurse cursed a gangster and left directly. Fang Heja on the side turned his head, pretending that he didn't know this person. Hansen quickly put the embarrassment behind him and said to Fang Heja, "Heja, We are really lucky this time. I heard that only senior leaders can stay in the VIP ward here. This time we not only add extra, I got a salary, got a promotion, and I'm not dead yet. You say how lucky you are. Captain. Fang Heja glanced at Hansen, his eyes still filled with depression. Hansen smiled, looked at Fang Heja and said, Heja, you rarely fail, right? The golden generation of Academy City, the first in the graduation test, Hansen said calmly. Before you came, there were a lot of rumors about you. That's it. Hearing Hansen say this, Fang Heja suddenly became a little shy. But you have to remember that being able to accept failure is more important than success. Because a person cannot always succeed, he will always fail. Besides, your performance this time has been very good, so there is no need, it's a shame. Yeah, Fang Heja nodded. At this moment, the door to the ward was opened. Wang Ke, who had been following Zhou Mai, walked in wearing a Daxia dragon bird uniform. Behind him, there was a dragon bird guard holding something in his hand. Are you Fang Heja? Wang Ke saluted Fang Heja and said with a serious face, hello, from now on, you have been incorporated into the Pan-Continental Alliance and the SOM Special Operations Team. The specific written notice is as follows: the meeting will be sent to your email. I am here to inform you that you will report to the new Dongyang Royal Academy of Sciences in 7 days. Also, after saying this, Wang Ke showed a trace of envy on his face. In 3 days, you are going to the palace to report. Fang Heja was stunned for a moment, still not understanding the situation. SOM Special Operations Team. Don't worry, it's a good thing. Wang Ke glanced at Fang Heja and left, leaving Hansen and Fang Heja in the ward at a loss, wondering what this so-called SOM Special Operations Team was doing. Royal Academy of Sciences, 13th floor underground. Kevin returned to his lounge and took out his cell phone to check. After being rescued from the underworld by Li Enping, he first joined the Great Xia Dragon Bird. Later, because of his excellent medical ability, he was asked by Shi Wen to come and work at the Royal Academy of Sciences. He glanced at the number on the phone and called it back directly. Hello, Hansen. Are you looking for me? Well, I have something to ask you. Do you know the SOM Special Operations Group? I heard it is related to your Royal Academy of Sciences. Yes. Kevin turned his head, looked at the notice on his desk and said, I was also transferred in as an accompanying medical officer. What? Hansen asked, what exactly is that thing? One of my guys was also asked to go there. I asked the leader. The leader Kevin was talking about was naturally Emma, who led everyone in the underworld. Since leaving the underworld, the group of people who survived in the underworld still kept in touch from time to time, and basically regarded as a faction. It should be intelligence from another world. The rest is confidential. I cannot tell you with my authority. By the way, your subordinate is Fang Heja. What's wrong? Do you know him? Humph, the guy named by His Majesty himself. He is now famous. In the underground training room, Jing Guang still has blonde hair and blue eyes, but his hair seems to be longer than before, and his muscles are thicker. At this moment, he is shirtless and sweating against a huge metal wall. I saw the fist wrapped in golden thoughts falling like a meteorite, hitting the metal panel, and making loud bangs. This metal panel is made of the adamantium alloy left over from the Ten-Fist sword. It can't be said to be manufactured, but the alloy that Li Enping retained after making 108 Ten-Fist swords was stored together in this way. Only this kind of metal can withstand Jing Guang's attack so easily without any damage. The blue-haired girl on the side looked at Jing Guang with admiration. The Ten-Fist sword in her hand had reached the strongest gravity she could control. In such a high-gravity environment, Jing Guang could still move freely as usual. Especially since the last time he reached the limit, she found that Jing Guang had never exited the transformation state. Obviously, his strength at this time had reached an unfathomable level. At this moment, Jing Guang suddenly stopped, He exhaled deeply, and then picked up the towel on the ground and began to wipe his sweat. Just a few seconds after he stopped exercising, the metal door of the training room was opened, and Lu Feng walked in with his hands behind his back and a smile on his face. He glanced at Jing Guang's body and sighed, "What a terrible talent." Jing Guang exhaled and asked directly, "What's the matter?" Lu Feng stretched out his hand, and a notice fell into Jing Guang's hand: "SOM Special Operations Team, report in 7 days. Special Operations Team, Jing Guang frowned and said, "What do they do?" "You have heard about the magic world, right?" Lu Feng smiled, "We are just going to collect intelligence and see if there are any strong people or things worth noting there. I heard that the wizards there are more powerful than 5 level 10 ability users are more difficult to deal with." Yes, there is such a saying. Seeing that Jing Guang was meaningless, Lu Feng turned around and left. Halfway through, he suddenly remembered something. "Oh, by the way, 3 days later, His Majesty asked you to go to the palace to see him. Got it?" Just after Lu Feng left, Jing Guang looked at the adamantium alloy on the wall and murmured, "Magic." The next moment, the golden energy burst out like a volcanic eruption, and the dazzling golden light filled the entire training room, making the blue-haired girl next to her unable to open her eyes. Accompanied by a loud bang that shook the earth, the ground under her feet seemed to have experienced a magnitude 10 earthquake, and the terrible air wave blew her whole body against the wall. When everything disappeared, she opened her eyes again, and there was no adamantium alloy there. She saw a bottomless hole smashed in the wall. Even if the adamantium alloy was still intact, it had already been bombarded to the depths of the ground that were difficult to see with the naked eye.